Hello and welcome to MINYIP, your fantasy sports community. I'm your host, Blake, coach of Youngy's Yaks, and I'm joined by Clinton. How are you, Clinton?
I'm good. Thank you, Blake. I'm coach of Dash's Dogs. I'm on location this week. I'm in Tasmania. So if my lighting's a bit different and the dog, can you still see the dog? Yes, you can.
Yeah, the dog's still there.
So I'm in Tassie and looking forward to this chat, Blake.
Yeah, last week you're the sick dog. Now you're the Tassie dog.
Yeah, that's it. Jack Jumper.
The Jack Jumpers, yeah. It's a footy show, Clinton. We won't talk about basketball. This is round 8 AFL Fantasy and Supercoach show. Just like the other previous two shows, you can flick through halfway through and stay up to date with the AFL Fantasy content. We'll be kicking off with Supercoach for a start. Thank you to everyone who watched the show or listened to the show last week. It was our most popular show since before round 1, Clinton. So thank you to everyone who joined in that show. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button again, just so that we keep up with that popularity there, Clinton.
Yeah, there's millions of people watching, so just join.
It was a
big
show.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could also check out our Patreon. That way you can get involved in our community with our group chats. I'll get the link up on the show notes there for our podcast listeners, but it's on your screen there for our YouTube watchers. So it's /MINYIP Fantasy Sports Community. So make sure you go in there to support the channel and get involved in MINYIP. Let's get into it with Supercoach, Clinton. I'll go first before you start bragging about how well you went. So I scored 2,477, which I thought was a very good score until I saw everyone else's scores around me in the Supercoach community. I went up in the rankings about 2,500 spots, and so now I'm 13,400. So pretty happy with that. The trades that I did Hayes for Hayes in the ruck division, and Sam Hayes scored me 53. It's just cash generation purposes, so that'll be a good cash rise there. I did Rochelle to Hobbs. Hobbs ended up scoring 13 in the end. Just another Essendon disappointment for me for the weekend, so that was good.
Oh dear.
He nearly had more touches than Supercoach points, Clinton. He had 10 disposals, but I think he gave away 2 free kicks and a 50-metre penalty. But my big trade, which I had enough cash for after the previous 2 trades, I did Sherry to Took Miller, who scored 160. So that I was very happy with that one. I VC'd Clayton Oliver, who scored 119. That wasn't enough for me to lock him in as captain, but then I went Jack Steele, who only scored 122 anyway. Not as big as some of the massive scores around Clinton, but overall pretty happy to get a rise in my rankings there.
Good stuff, Blake. That's all you can do. My score for the week was 26.61. Obviously, very happy with that. That gave me a round rank of actually 385 for the week, and now I'm into a rank of 2,987. So pretty damn happy with that. My trades all panned out well. I also did Hayes to Hayes. I think this time last week I was thinking about bringing in Jack Steele, but what I decided was I was pretty keen to get Cripps back in. I thought knew I'd made a mistake by trading him out. I had doubt that he'd come back so soon and play so well. So I wanted to get him back in. So I got rid of Rochelle for Cripps, and with Boost, I traded out Cherry for Luke Parker, which was another player that I had seen recently played more midfield minutes, and I was really keen to get him in. And I was eyeing him off as soon as he got his forward status, and he's playing really well. So very happy with those 3 trades. I did VC Max Gawn, so I was very happy to take his score of 172. And I think as my team was completed, I still had one decision to make, and that was tossing up between Roses and Sam de Koning, and I actually went with Roses. So I complained that I scored 30 less points than what I should have, but Yeah, so that was my last decision I had to make.
Not good enough, Clinton. No.
So Rose has scored 48, and no, so very happy with the team. I have burnt through quite a few trades, but I think I've set my team up pretty well, and I've literally only have in the short term 2 or 3 players that I sort of need to upgrade at the moment. So in a good spot.
How many trade boosts have you got left there, Clinton?
It's a great question. I can't really notice at the moment because I've already used it for this week, and I'm likely to reverse that. So I think I've used 3. I think I've used 3 off the top of my head. Yeah.
Yeah, so 2 remaining. I think we're pretty similar. I think I've got 23 trades left in the 2 boosts. Yeah, very well played there, Clinton. Those trades worked out perfectly for you. Parker only in about 5% of teams. That's probably doubled since last weekend.
He was in 2% on the weekend, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I couldn't get much better than that, Clinton, could you? Well, besides that 30 points, which you should have done better. Let's go with our Guess Who, Clinton, one of your favourite segments.
Yeah, can't wait for it.
Had to play the Guess Who clip.
I like the whole the jingle, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you missed that. So, all right, there Excellent. You go. Last week, my Guess Who was Laddams, who at some stages it was actually in and out of my trade plans last week. Luckily, I didn't because he only scored 85. But the reason why I didn't get him was because of the inclusion of Callum Sinclair, which was an unexpected one for me. Guess who, Clinton?
Yes.
I'm a midfielder, and I'm the 8th highest averaging player this season. You're not allowed to look at your stats there while you're playing here.
I'm looking at my team. I doubt you'd have someone that's in my team.
Guess who it's my price is practically unchanged since the start of the season. Against the next 3 opposition sides, I averaged 130 last season. I've already scored above 133 times this year, and my lowest score is 87. I'm priced at 580k.
Midfielder. My guess is Brayshaw.
No, he's only in 5% of teams. He plays for Port Adelaide, Clinton.
Boki
is correct. He's averaging 121 this year. He's going under the radar a bit, and he's coming up against some opposition that he dominated against last year. Any thought to Travis Boak at all, Clinton?
Well, I try to avoid the senior players. Parker's obviously right on that borderline. I was thinking, no, I don't think so. You can Google that while I chat. But
I'll do that. Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure Parker's a bit younger, but yeah, I think Boak is just that. Yeah, he's very consistent. The big concern for me would be I would avoid him because of his bye. I think he's got the first bye, and I'll get to maybe I can start talking about that right now. I think you've got to be really careful about that first bye. So, for example, I'm eyeing off the likes of Jack Steele, Josh Kelly for this week, but I think I would be setting myself to fail in that first round of bye. So, just something to be mindful of.
Well, you've jumped the gun a bit there, Clinton, because
sorry about that.
One of our we'll get to that shortly. You are very correct in Luke Parker is 4 years younger than Travis Boak.
Thank you.
Parker's only 29. I did not realize he was only that young. It seems like he's been around for a long time. Well, eventually you got there for the Guess Who, Clinton. It took you longer than any other one so far, but
second guess, yeah.
Yeah. Let's go across to our bold predictions, Clinton. Let's do a recap of last week firstly. What was your bold predictions last week?
I had 2, Blake. The first one was I was backing in Touk Miller to bounce back and score 160 plus So I think that's a big green tick. So after the first quarter, it wasn't looking very likely, but he's pulled through, and I think that was a very good prediction on that one. The second one, I also backed in Zach Butters to respond and score his highest score for the year, which didn't occur. And I think a big factor in that was the conditions up in Cairns. So I'll give him a bit of a leave pass, but I'm still hoping he can maybe get back to his 100 scoring this week.
Yeah, very well played on Took there, Clinton. You actually convinced me to get him into my side, if I'm honest. You highlighted me to the fact that he was coming up against weaker opposition who just let midfielders do whatever they want. So you talked me into that one, so thank you. My bold predictions last week, if you remember, Clinton, I had one where I tried to put a Moz on a player, and that player was... So as you already mentioned, he's pumped out another score of 139. So that bold prediction didn't work. But,
don't do it again.
My other one was Sherry to score 130 plus. And then
I did give you a bit of a flag that he may be in danger of CCJ coming in.
Yeah,
but then he got injured.
Didn't know he had a broken foot.
Yeah.
And then
CCJ didn't score what you predicted, though, did he?
Nah, Goldie was the number one ruck.
Okay.
But he came out and only scored 125, not 130. So fell short there. Hit me with your bold predictions for this week, Clinton.
Okay. Someone who is a bit of the talk at the moment, who's had quite a couple of weeks, and it worked for Took. So now I'm going to back in Jack Macrae. Jack Macrae to respond. Friday night football. I'm going to have the VC on him. A lot of people will avoid that and go elsewhere. I'm going to back him in to respond. And what do you want? 150, 160? I did worth for Took. I'll go the same for Macrae. Let's go 160.
Yeah, considering the caliber of the player Macrae is and the big scores he's pumped out in the past, 160 sounds fair enough.
I'll be happy with that on the dot.
Yep. All right, I'll hit you with my one, and then I'll come back to you.
Yep.
A player who's probably going to be one of the number one forwards this year, Clinton, but he's had a few lower scores lately and hasn't scored above 100, is Tim Taranto. He's going to score his highest score for the season, Clinton, and score over 130.
Yeah, he's one I'm eyeing off. There's a lot of similar forward lines going around with the likes of Dunkley, Brody, Butters, Canelio, Martin, etc. Pretty soon there will be maybe some upgrading going on down there, and Taranto's one that I've got my eye on for sure. The next one may not play. We'll see what happens with the Fremantle situation. But there's already 6 players down with whatever it's called, health and safety protocols.
Yeah, well said, yeah.
Let's go with a player that is being traded out by a lot of people. How many people? Almost 10,000 as we speak. But let's go with O'Driscoll to put in a great performance and potentially, not sure, I've got a feeling he might get some midfield time with the amount of outs that are happening. I'm going a bold 110 plus for O'Driscoll.
110 plus. Let me just have a quick look at his highest scores for the year. Yeah, I'll definitely accept that, Clinton. He's had a couple of scores over 100 now, but he hasn't cracked the 110 yet, so that's definitely reasonable from you.
Thank you.
My next Moz, Clinton.
Oh, dear. Be careful. Is he in my team?
He is in your team.
Oh, I don't.
I think he was the highest scoring player from last round, Clinton. Oh, no, it was actually the third highest scoring player of the round. Max Gawn. He's been is hitting some form, but means Luke Jackson hasn't been getting much time at all. And they just need to work him back into the season, make sure he's up and firing as well. Please don't provide me with some more information that he's dropped or something or he's injured. Max Gawn is going to score under 110.
It's not that bold, but he's averaging 126.
He just scored 100. He's averaging 126 and just scored 172.
Yeah, well, I can't see it happening, so I'll let you have it. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of you putting Mozzes on my players, actually. So,
well, I had an opposite effect for Cripps last week, so
yeah.
You got one there, so that's all right.
You're 1-1. The previous week it worked with O'Driscoll, I think it was.
Yeah, that's correct. It did work with O'Driscoll. Let's get into community questions. Some very daunting music there for our community questions.
Very threatening with a big shark coming.
You already went into it earlier, Clinton, but the question from our community was, should we start considering the buys in our trade plans?
I think if you haven't considered it yet, now's the time to do so. So on the actual app, you can look up, there's a button you can press called Tools, Show Buys, and you go round by round and look at how many players you have playing per buy round. And for example, in round 12, there's lots of teams with a lot of players that have the buy. So Carlton have the buy. I'm rattling through some players, but yeah, Jaden Short,
GWS with
GWS,
Bruce,
Port Adelaide, Essendon. So there's
Jack Steele. Yep.
Yeah, so there's Jack Steele. So there's lots of players who are very well owned who are in that buy round. So it's just something to be very mindful of. And as I said earlier, for example, not this week, but next week, I'm going to eye off another midfield premium. I like Jack Steele, but I'm just very concerned that it will cost me in that first week of the buy. So it's something to be very careful of. And I know I'm right on that fringe of potentially not being able to field 18 because I'm worried about it's probably not so much the premiums that you have like the Jack Steele. It's what are the bench options. So to fill up your 18 players, if you have potentially a couple of players who may be on that fringe who are on your bench, you need them playing. And if they have the next month happen to get dropped, all of a sudden, yeah, you might be in a bit of carnage. So we'll see.
Yeah, Essendon have also got the buy. So likes of Nick Martin, Ben Hobbs, Sam Hayes has got the buy, Gibcus. So just, I believe this information is still correct, Clinton, for the people, if it's your first time playing, it's your top 18 players, their scores that count. Even if you've got 20, it's still the top 18. And I believe you still get extra trades when it comes to an extra trade when it comes to the buy round.
Yes, you do.
So is it 3 trades? I think it used to be 3 trades for the buy round. I'm pretty sure it's still the same.
You get 3 trades, and if you want to boost, you get 4. So, but in saying that, you still want to be. You don't want to just hold off your trades for those rounds. I know right now there's a lot of aggressive super coaches going hard and completing their teams. That's all well and good. It's just being careful still of those buy rounds. So I'm still aiming to continue to trade hard and fill my team. It's just it may impact which premiums I bring in the next few weeks.
Yeah, just counting mine there at the moment. I've only got 17 for round 12 currently, so I need to start looking at my my trades if they're playing or not in round 12. That's my next question, Clinton. Is it worth trading out rookies on a slow burn to generate cash rather than waiting for them to peak on their bubble of break-evens? So the likes of Connor McDonald, who's just been slowly chipping away, scoring about 50 each round. He's just slowly going up in price. Gibcus, Sam De Koning, those kinds of players. Is it worth trading them out early, even if they're not even if they're not close to their break-even bubble?
The those last couple of players you mentioned, I wouldn't be trading out yet because they have very low break even still. But there's lots of other players which, along those lines of Dacos, Horn Francis, if you've still got Richelli or players like that, I'd be trading at those players before the likes of Gibkiss and Sam de Koning. So all depends on their break even, but then also depends what you're doing with those trades. If you're looking at your team that you have no one really to trade out, then if it's going to improve your team, then still do it. But ideally, if those players are still playing well, still going up in price, you ideally want to keep them. But for the cheaper players who aren't going up much at all, maybe, it is potentially time. I think Paddy McCartan, although he's likely to be back this week, if he helps your trades, then you can trade him out as long as it's improving your team.
No, good answer there, Clinton. It's given me something to consider there, considering I don't have any immediate trade plans. So, best downgrade options this week, Clinton. So those players that are got the lowest of break evens, which players do you consider to be the best downgrade options?
Well, obviously, the best one at the moment is Greg Clark, but he still has another game to go. And the old Supercoach rule would be to wait another week. But if it's improving your team and you want to get his score on field and it helps your other trade, I definitely think he's the best pick. The second pick for me would be McComb for the Bulldogs. He's played his 2 games. He seems to be going okay, or I should say well enough to stay in the team in the short term. I think his score was impacted with his efficiency in the weekend, but if he can use the ball a bit better, I think he can score pretty well. I think he finds the ball pretty well. The Bulldogs share the ball around, so if he can have a good couple of weeks, I think he's a really good option this week. And for example, with my trades as we speak, I'm trading him in before Clark, just to be extra safe. I think the smart option could be to go Clark to get him on field, but for my team, I'm still undecided as we speak, being on Wednesday night. It may change with team selection, but McComb, what did I say before McComb? Whichever, I think he's the option I'm going for. There's a few other players that are worth considering, but I think there's a few that can wait until next week. What do you think?
I'm not sold on McComb personally. I think his score was assisted by a couple of goals last week. His efficiency hasn't been great in either of his games so far, and he only scored 37 in game 1. I think I'm not sold on him, to be honest. And Bulldogs being a strong side, I doubt his long-term cash generation and being able to stay in that side. The other one is Paul Curtis. He's for North Melbourne forward, 117k. He's played his 2. He's got the lowest break even. I know there's another one there. Strandika is 102k as well.
He's out though. He's out, not playing.
Is he a health and safety, or just because is Nick back?
Health and safety protocols.
Yeah. Thank you. So Curtis has got the lowest break even of the bubbles then. Break even of -42. He's probably my best downgrade option, I'd say, out of him and McComb. Greg Clark.
I'd disagree because of he plays for Kangaroos. He's a forward line player. That's and it's another 15k cheaper. So that's where we're slightly different, but I'd go McComb.
Yeah, and you've almost talked me into Greg Clark there, Clinton, because I personally was not considering him being only played the one game. And if he gets injured, you're stuck with a 102k play on your bench, and you just got to side swap him or spend cash to get in another player. But his points on field could be beneficial this week for trading out the likes of Horn Francis or Dacos, getting him his on-field points might be very handy for my trades there, Clinton.
And Luke Shuey was just announced as out as well, so you can only imagine him playing a lot of midfield time. I just, it all depends. The one thing that swayed me, and we'll get to our trades later, is that there's a player that I still have in Hugh Dixon, and it looks like he may be out potentially West Coast number one ruck this week. I was going to trade him out and pretty much bring in Clark, but due to the fact Dixon will be potentially rucking, by playing it safe, I may keep and field Dixon and just give Clark one more week to be, as you just said before, more certain that he's going to rise in money and it's a worthwhile trade.
Yeah, just another one back to Paul Curtis. Of his 12 disposals, he said he was playing forward for North Melbourne. Of his 12 disposals, only 3 of them were in the forward line. It was moving up and around the ball. So, difference of opinion there, but that's all right. We don't always have to agree, Clinton.
No, we don't, and I think it all depends on what position you're trying to trade in. And right now, I'm in a position that I don't really, because what I mentioned about Dixon, I'm not really in need of a forward line rookie. Whereas in the midfield, I can have that luxury.
Yeah, was there? What other players did you want to discuss for Supercoach there, Clinton?
I think we just mentioned the downgrades. I think it's worthwhile mentioning what upgrade targets we're aiming for. And so I know personally I've got quite lucky. Well, when I say luck, I've chosen some players and I've been lucky with injuries. I mean, other people have chosen the likes of Hall and players like that who have got injured. But I know Tom Stewart finally came through with the goods. He was a player that I've had since the start of the year. He missed a game with a bug, whatever he had. So he's been a bit of a wait, but I think he finally came through and now it looks like a great option to have. The question now is if you're upgrading, I'll just rattle off some names. So there's players now who have had really good weeks and now you have to decide, is now the best time to bring them in? So another player which I'm going to bring in this week, or I haven't obviously had all year, is Jaden Short. I haven't had him all year. He moved to the midfield. He scored 152. I have to decide right now if I want him or not, and I think now's the right time to bring him in. He's pretty much at his starting price, and the way he played last week, I think there's every chance he could become a bit like a Rory Laird and just maybe not as much inside, but he can still get a lot of the ball. So he's someone I'm bringing in this week. But then there's also Mills and Luke Parker, the other 2 players I wanted to bring up. And for that matter, Cripps, who scored well. These are the players that you need to decide if you don't have them. You need to get them in soon if you want them. So Mills is almost out of reach as we speak. But in saying that, for me next week, I'm going to have lots of money in the bank, and to suit my buys, I may back up the truck and fork out a lot of money for Mills instead of Jack Steele purely because of the buys. So that's something I have to wait and decide next week. And then the other one was Parker. He's gone. Obviously, he got the DPP. He's actually moved into the midfield more. He scored 150 in the weekend, and he looks like a great option. So here's another player that if you don't have, now would be the best time to bring them in. So there's just a few names that, in terms of premiums, you need to start thinking if you don't have them, you need to get them in. So it's just a question of how much is too much. I think Cripps, Parker and Short are really affordable, and I think you should be trying to get them in, whereas Mills and Stewart in their positions are very expensive, and it's understandable that you want to avoid them because they're too expensive. But in saying that, if they continue this form, you won't be able to afford them and you won't have them for the rest of the year. And they may continue to score well. So so it's just one of those ones.
Yeah, it's a good point there, Clinton. For me, positions that I sort of need to fill at the moment is another one or two midfielders and a defender. For me, the defender that I've missed out on so far is Doherty. I believe is in your side. He had one of his lowest scores for the year last week, and it was a 91. For me, that's still an affordable price at 562k. So he's one that I need to start considering this week if I want to be getting him. And Cripps is definitely the other one. I traded him out 2 weeks ago, so at that price, he's still very affordable. 526k, averaging 121. Yeah.
Doherty's score of 91 was that was a good 91. It wasn't as if you see some scores or players great at 90, whereas I thought watching the game, he's played really well, and I thought that would have been 110 plus. So it's just one of those random lower scores, and his break even's still only 114. So he's someone that maybe isn't as desperate to get him this week if you want to get him like yourself. But he's definitely a good option, I believe.
The other strategy, which I'm still considering each week, Clinton, is having a dual position player in the midfield. So one that I can swing, a premium dual position player that I can swing between the defender and mids and forwards and mids. For the moment, I've currently got Taranto in my midfield. I think a good strategy for my team going forward is having at least one dual position player from each line in my midfield. If there happens to be an injury or something pop up, then I can swing them across. That's sort of that's always something in my strategy that I'm considering.
I understand that opinion, and it makes sense. Just make sure you don't compromise a premium player, because in general the midfield players have a higher average than whether it be defenders or forwards. So just be careful you don't compromise. You could be compromising 10 to 15 point average because of that theory. So the top 8 mids generally score more than what the forwards and backs do. But I do understand that theory. I've thought about this year myself, but it's just flexibility is good. But
especially if you get to close to the end of the year and you start running out of trades if you're using 3 each week at the moment. Yes. It's just something to consider for your teams with the strategy. That's all the players I want to discuss, Clinton. If you're happy to get into your trade plans.
Sounds good. So as I've said so far, I am deliberating over 2 or 3 trades. The first one I am doing is Horn Francis out for McComb. So I'm going to do that one. McComb plays Friday night. I'm going to have the emergency on him. Dacos can go for me for short. My back line is pretty solid, and short would end up in D5 for me. So I've got a pretty solid back line. That's with Bowie at D6. So Dacos, despite being a player that you could continue to keep a bit longer, he's someone that is just ready to go for me. And as I said, my last decision will all depends on what West Coast, how they name the team, and if Dixon is their first ruck, and I can see him playing a fair bit of ruck, I'll keep him instead of bringing Clark. So Clark can just wait an extra week and be extra safe, and then I'll make sure he's the right option to bring in next week. So as I said, McComb can be my emergency. I've sort of set up my team that O'Driscoll is in my M8. So if McComb is scoring really well in the first half for the Bulldogs game, which is the first game, I could potentially loop that score on and bench O'Driscoll and just play it that way. So that's what I'm doing with my overall team. It looks pretty solid. And as I've said earlier, I'm at this point going to VC McRae because I just want to back him in. I may get it wrong, but I think he's due for a rebound game, and Lockie Neal can be my backup captaincy score. I do like several players, but Miller, the Melbourne players of Oliver, Petrarca, and Gawn. They're very good options, but at this stage, just so I could get a VC score, I'm thinking of just doing that on a Friday night, and I'm going to back in McRae.
Good work there, Clinton. My original plan was to not trade at all, but I suspect Dacos is going to have a spell soon. To be honest, I think they said last week that he was sort of carrying a bit of an ankle injury. I think he's probably due for a rest soon. And yeah, what's his break even now? His break even 74. For me, he's ready to go as well. So Horn Francis and Dacos potentially going to be my trades out. I am going at this stage Horn Francis to Clark because I need an on-field midfielder. I don't trust Ward, Connor McDonald, or Ben Hobbs to put out a half-decent score at the moment. So Horn Francis to Greg Clark, which will give me enough cash to go Dacos to Sam Doherty.
Not bad at all.
My VC and C is very similar to yours, except for I'm going with another Bulldogs player as my vice captain in Josh Dunkley. He played very well last week and looked dangerous up forward as well. He was able to sort of get a rest down there and boot a couple of goals and into Lockie Neal as my captain. Yeah, he's in amazing form as well. So that's my Supercoach plans there, Clinton.
Good job, Blake. Well done. Good luck.
Yeah, I'm still not sold on the Greg Clark move, but it'll determine. Yeah, team selection will change that again, I'm sure.
Yeah, there could be I just got a feeling something random could pop up, and I think Hewitt's still a watch. I think he's been training recently, but it all depends if he comes back in. So just the big one is being prepared for your buys, and every trade now you need to start weighing up how's your team looking with each buy round.
Yeah, both Doherty and Jaden Short have that round 12 buy, which is quite frustrating. If George Hewitt doesn't play, I've got Gibcus and McCartan to loop into that position, with Carlton being the last game. So I get to check that out as well. All right, Clinton, that'll wrap up our Supercoach. So 38-minute mark, we'll switch over to AFL Fantasy. Yep, good transition there, Clinton, from AFL Supercoach to AFL Fantasy. So this is our round 8 AFL Fantasy section. Do you want to talk through a round review of your AFL Fantasy, Clinton, from round 7?
Yes, I haven't been going as well in fantasy, but I did score a pretty good score on the weekend. I scored 23-1-2, which is, I think, anything over 2,300 was a very solid score. That's improved my ranks to 13,635. So it's been a disappointing year. I've made a lot of mistakes early, and I'm just clawing back now. So my trades, I took out Cherry and Grundy, and I brought in Clark and Oliver. So there is several players on my team that need upgrading, but it's sort of one of those things that I can't do it all at once. So, yeah, I scored okay. Several things that need addressing in my team, but, going okay now. So hopefully I can keep on climbing the ranks each week.
Yep, good round there, Clinton. My score was just under you, 2,255. It boosted me up the ranking slightly to be 3,695, so about 400 or 500 ranking climb. Overall pretty happy with how things going. I got my trades pretty spot on last week, so I traded out Grundy and Hayes, and I brought in Gawn and Greg Clark. So very happy to get Greg Clark's score early, and I was able to loop his score onto the field as well because me didn't play. I VC'd Gawn, and was able to cash in on that score as well. So very happy with how those trade plans work out there, Clinton. Not too much further to add of how my team's going. Let's get into our hits and misses. Yeah.
Good symphony.
Good transition there, Clinton. Get into your hits and misses, please, Clinton.
Let's go with the hits. Yeah, I had some solid scores. Don't we start with the hits or misses?
Yeah, start with some hits.
Yeah, I had some good scores. Someone who I brought in several weeks ago is starting to really come through for me, and that's Angus Brayshaw. He scored 110, so he's been a solid pick for me. Obviously, he's slotted down back, so he's averaging 95 now, and he's been a good pick for me. So hopefully, he can continue those good scores. The other one I want to give a pat on the back to is Clark. Obviously, brought him in similar to you. Yeah, had him on the bench, but looped his score on. So that was a very good pickup last week. And if you haven't got him, this week is the week to bring him in.
Yep, very good. My biggest hit was bringing in Max Gawn. What did he score? 149 points as my captain. So very happy with that. My next hit, who deserves an honourable mention after the season he's been providing for me, is Patrick Nash for West Coast. He's had three scores. He's scored 3 scores over 90 now and hasn't scored below 60 as a rookie. I'm pretty happy with that. He scored 94 last week as his highest score. So very happy with how Nash has been going in my forward line and providing doing a very good role for me there in the forward line.
Good stuff. My missus, just someone who, in terms of AFL Fantasy, may be on the chopping block. That's Will Brodie. He scored 64. So obviously he's been a great pickup this year. He's been scoring pretty consistently, but if he does happen to get another 60, he may be on the chopping block next week. But as I've said earlier, there's a few players in a similar boat. So there's a few like that I need to start upgrading. And that's something which I'll be trying to address over the next few weeks. And as we mentioned earlier, a lot will depend on the bye rounds. The other player I want to mention is, obviously it was hard up there in Cairns, but Zach Butter scored 74. Just a player that obviously was started as a premium option in the forward line, just hasn't really delivered, but I'm hoping he can bounce back this week. So that's a couple of low scores there. And I could go through a few more. I mean, just a handful of these names that I'm looking to upgrade soon. Bowie scored 69, O'Driscoll 63. Crouch has been consistently scoring around that 80 to 90, so I think I need to upgrade him. And that's about it. So otherwise, my team was pretty solid, but those are the types of players I need to start upgrading.
Yep. The misses for me my main one was Tom Green. Since I brought him in, he scored 91 and he's put out his lowest score for the year in a 74 last round against Adelaide. So not good enough, Tom Green. I brought him in for Patrick Cripps when Cripps was injured 2 weeks ago, and that move has backfired on me. So not good enough, Tom Green. And the other one I had, who was my lowest scorer, and I think it's time to go for Horn Francis. He's put out a score of 52. For fantasy, he hasn't been scoring that great. He's made a little bit of cash for us, but he's only really had one or two big games for AFL Fantasy. So for a number 1 draft pick, Silvani let him know about it on the weekend. It's not good enough.
I actually missed his name, but he's another one that I need to get rid of too. So add him to my list, Blake.
I'll add him to your list of your misses there, Clinton.
Yeah.
Let's get into discussing community players, Clinton. There's a few players now that are on they're sort of hitting their bubble of how long we can hold them for, in the likes of Horn Francis, Dacos, Rochelle Sherry's injured now, who's in my team. These kinds of players. Who cops the chopping block first?
Well, with the situation that happened for me last week, and we pretty much going to talk through my trades. But I actually traded out Cherry last weekend, so I've still got Jack Hayes in my team. So he's someone I need to get rid of. And yeah, I think of the names we've just mentioned, Horn Francis probably is the first one that needs to go. Dacos is nearing that stage. Once again, it may come down to team selection, but of those names, literally that I just rattled off, those are the couple that stand out the most that are ready to get rid of. So probably Horn Francis will be the first one that will need to go. Dacos is obviously right up there. And then, yeah, I think Bowie was an okay selection, but he's currently in 15% of teams. But I think he's averaging 74, which is strange because I think watching him, he's involved in the play so much and he's always around the play and sometimes doesn't get used. And he's someone I think could score, 90 pretty consistently, but for whatever reason, he's averaging only 74. So I think he's not my biggest priority. I think it's more the younger players that we need to be concerned about. And yeah,
His
the rest
break-even's only 61 there for Bowie, Clinton.
Yeah, and the rookies like Dacos and Horn Francis, I think, as you mentioned, whether it be slight injuries or not, they'll be getting a rest soon. So now's probably the right time for those couple of players.
Yeah, Horn Francis break-even is 68. I doubt the way he's been scoring, I don't think he's going to score that. And last thing you want is your rookies going down in price by much if he happens to put in a very low score. I did the opposite, Clinton, to you. So I traded out Hayes last week instead of Sherry. And so now Sherry's still sitting there. But in terms of my priorities, I need to trade out the players who are playing first so that they're not losing cash. Even though it's a big price to be sitting there on my bench in Sherry, who's, he's 523K. But I don't want the likes of Rochelle, Horn Francis and Dacos going down in price before I trade them out.
I'd just be careful that once the buyers come, it's better to have a playing rookie than a non-playing player. So it's something to be careful of. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd get more money by trading out Sherry. If I really wanted to go into the calculations of it, I'd work out how much money Horn Francis will lose this week if he doesn't reach his break even. But it might be getting a bit too technical.
It's pretty difficult to work that out without knowing what he's going to score. But I think it's safe to say the way he's been averaging, yeah, he might roughly get his. So I don't think him. If he plays, I don't think it should be a factor that he's going to lose money. It's probably more so what he's actually going to score and if he's an on-field option.
Depends on what your priorities are, Clinton. But players that started scoring well at the start of the year and that are starting to put in a couple of bad scores now, would you consider, for the sake of my team, the likes of Tom Green, even Sinclair's put in a couple of lower scores? Depends on the priorities of your team and who's injured and whatnot, but would you consider side swapping some of those kinds of players who started well but are starting to drop off a little bit now?
I would not get rid of Sinclair. I think he's a solid option. Tom Green, you brought in only pretty recently, so it's almost like you have to see that through. I think if you've got other priorities with those rookies, I think they're your priority. I think you have to back in the fact that you've brought in Green, despite maybe he wasn't the best option. It hasn't paid off for now, but I think you have to back that in. On the flip side, if there's players like Matt Crouch, who I mentioned before, if he's consistently getting 80, it's hard to really see him getting a 120 at the moment. So I think he'd be a high priority to get rid of compared to the likes of Sinclair and Tom Green. Maybe it's because of how recent you brought them in. So I think you have to back that trade in a bit longer.
And some other players who are in a similar boat to Matt Crouch there, Clinton. Tim Taranto has only been averaging 83 over the last 3 rounds. Jordan DeGoey, who started well, he's only been averaging 83. Some teams might have got these players in early and now be sort of stuck with their lower scores. But I think you got to ride it out. You've got in these players thinking that they'll be good long-term options. So I think you've got to ride out. Even Heaney's only been averaging 88 over the last 3.
That's still pretty good for a forward-line player, and he's been saving his score to pretty late in games. So I think those are the types of players. They're not your concerns right now. I think it's the names we've mentioned, especially the likes of Horn Francis and Dacos. They're your priorities to get rid of. And then I guess the other topic, Blake, is which players to bring in. I think it's really important to, as we mentioned with Clark, he's a must if you don't have him. I think McComb, he actually scored 83 in fantasy, Blake. So I'm not sure if you have him in fantasy, but if you haven't got him, like that's what I was saying before about him, that I think he's a must if you don't have him. So in terms of downgrade options, I think there are a couple of the obvious ones to be targeting. So it's still about ideally you're going up and down and bringing in that type of cheap rookie who's going to go up in price for quite some time, and then choosing which player to bring into the team. So just with the names you mentioned before, with the likes of Tom Green, I think with the players that you're bringing in, you want to be confident that they're going to be season keepers, and you can see them being a long-term pick. So I think if there's any risky players, I think ideally you're, instead of the likes of Tom Green, you want to be bringing people in now that you're pretty confident are going to be season keepers. Otherwise, you end up with a team with the likes of Crouch, the likes of players that you're not 100% happy with. So I think it's all about targeting those right premiums.
Yeah, at the time that I brought Tom Green in, I thought he was going to be a season-long keeper. He was averaging 106, and he had 5 out of his 6 games scoring above 100. So at the time I brought him in, I thought he was the real deal. Initially, I wasn't sold on him. One issue I currently have, Clinton, is my forward line in picking the season-long keeper. So I'm looking at bringing in a forward line premium. Who would you consider to be sort of your top 6 forward line premiums as a long-term option?
Yeah, you've caught me on the hop there. But I think we've mentioned him earlier, but I think Luke Parker's a great option to bring in at his price, especially. So I think he'd be top of my priorities if you don't have him. Obviously, there's the likes of Dunkley, who should be one that a lot of people have. But then at the moment, I still think there's a lot of players that are worth keeping. That I think Canelio is still been scoring pretty well. Brody, who I said before, maybe a bit on the chopping block, but then Butters, you've started him. If you started him throughout, you need to back him in for longer. So I don't have the exact list in front of me, Blake, but I think you want to be targeting players that you're pretty confident in. I think Parker would be my priority if you don't have him.
Yeah, Parker's been averaging 111 across the last 3. I don't think I've seen many Sydney games, and that's sort of what's putting me off at the moment. Just having that eye test of Sydney, not seeing their games hurts my confidence in him, to be honest. But other than that, yeah, so you got Dunkley. Tim English coming back from a hamstring injury would be a risky selection if you're looking at bringing him in this week. He's still only 837K. But I think that would be a very risky option to bring him in straight away if he's selected this week. Tim Taranto's the next highest averaging forward, but he's only been averaging 83. And then you got Heaney. Moore for Hawthorn, he's the 5th highest averaging player. Laddams and then Parker is the highest averaging players. I'm still very undecided with 3 of the top 7 being Sydney players there, Clinton.
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, every season that something similar happens. I think Bulldogs players at the start of the year were doing the same thing. So it all depends what players you're needing to get rid of, and just bringing those right premiums. So if we're going straight onto our trades, so for example, this week, as I've said, I've still got Jack Hayes, so he's going for me. Horn Francis is going. A rookie which I didn't mention before, but I've obviously got McComb and Clark already. But Carroll for Carlton, he scored 87 on debut last week. I'm bringing him in this week. So I think he's going to be a very popular trade in, especially for those who already have Clark and McComb. So I'm bringing in Carroll, and the player that I'm bringing in, I'm sort of tossing up between Parker, but I think I'll lean towards getting Cripps in. I think he's in obviously great form, and if he can keep his form up, he'll be scoring those hot, scores of at least 110 plus. So that's the way I'm heading this week. And in saying that, I haven't dissected fully, but I am a bit concerned about that round 12 bye.
Yeah, I need to start looking at my buys for AFL Fantasy as well, Clinton. I don't have McComb in fantasy, but I might have to take a miss on him because of my priorities. I'm going to trade out Sherry. I still have Rochelle sitting there, Rochelle on my bench, who will most likely have to play an on-field role for me this week, which is quite frustrating. I'm going to be upgrading Horn Francis. Sorry, just to backtrack there. So Sherry to that Carlton player you just mentioned, Carroll, and I need to. So Horn Francis, I've got 917k to play with, and I want to bring in a forward. And the player that I currently don't have is Tim Taranto, even though he's been averaging 83 over the last 3. I think he's going to be one of the key premium forwards long term for the season. So at the moment, that's going to be Horn Francis up to Tim Taranto.
What about his break even? Have you got that in front of you or not? If you don't, that's okay. But I'd argue Parker would be the better option, but you can make that decision yourself. But Taranto is a type of player that has these weird sort of runs where you maybe just be going okay for a couple of weeks, and then the next few weeks he's like the best player in fantasy, and he'll score 150 every week. So
you make a very good point there, Clinton. Tim Taranto's break even is 142.
Yeah. So and Parker's
Heaney's is 111. So of these premiums that I usually go with, don't have a lot of faith there. Parker, I'll find that for you while you keep talking.
Parker, I think, would be the smarter option this week, purely because he's form recently, and
But in saying that, now I'm flicking through it. Parker's is 75. Rochelle's break even is 76 for this week. So whether to trade out Horn Francis first or Rochelle is
decisions. That's what it's all about.
Yes, but yep. All right. I'll say Luke Parker for the moment. Then Clinton, you've convinced me again.
Okay. Well, you can blame me if it goes pear-shaped, but all I can do is give you my advice.
I'm sure selections on the Thursday night team selections will change that opinion, but at the moment I need to bring in another forward.
Good luck with that.
Thanks, mate. Anything further you want to add before we wrap up there, Clint?
No, I don't think so. I think yeah. Just as we've said all recording, just be wary of those buys. Start looking at that, and yeah, just be in terms of fantasy. Start looking at those, making sure you have those, still have those rookies coming in, but then also upgrading your team. So I think those rookies that we've mentioned are worth getting in this week. But then also, you want to start getting rid of those off-field, some of those players that have been scoring poorly recently.
No, it's great advice there, Clinton. Can see why you're climbing up the rankings. Thanks to everyone who's been watching, liking, and subscribing to the show. We hope you enjoy the show that we've been putting out, breaking it into the AFL Fantasy and Supercoach. Good luck to everyone for round 8. We'll be posting our teams on Twitter and Instagram as well. Did that through last week. So we'll stay up to date through that, and we'll look forward to you joining us next week.
Bye.
Thanks, Flint.